Hello, greetings. I am Sharon Pinder, President and CEO of the Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council and the operator of the U.S. Department of Commerce's Minority Business Development Agency in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the first one of its kind in the history of MBDA and the Commonwealth. The Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council is a national organization in scope. In fact, we're one of 23 affiliates of the National Minority Supply Development Council. Our goal in life, and for the last 50 years, has been to certify, connect, develop, and advocate for minority-owned businesses. This year, we are especially excited because we're 50 years old. 50 years in helping minority businesses survive and thrive through all kinds of conditions and situations over the last 5 decades. Welcome back to our podcast, our HotChat Podcast, designed especially for minority businesses. This month is National Financial Literacy Month, and we're sitting down with a host of guests to discuss financial literacy, generational wealth, and succession planning. This week, we're having a conversation with the one and only man, myth, and the legend, Robert Wallace. Sometimes we call him Bob, president of the Bith Group Technologies. Bob has more than 30 years of business experience, and he's a young man spanning engineering, energy, and IT, and is here today to share his journey and offer some sage advice around this very important topic for this month. When we talked about it, this conversation in terms of watching the money, Bob was the first one on the list of people we knew that we had to have this conversation with him. But before we get into our conversation with Bob, I'd like to first thank those organizations, along with the Minority Business Development Agency and their grant that make this possible, of supporting minority businesses. Our title sponsor, the Exelon Corporation, and under its umbrella, BGE and Exelon Company, Pepco and Exelon Company, Capital One, Amicus, one of our premier minority businesses, and also SB and Company, one of our premier minority businesses as well. Before I bring Bob on, in case you haven't heard of him, let me just share some information. Now, I find that hard to believe, but let me share information with you anyway. He is internationally known as an entrepreneur, a serial one at that, an author, a speaker, and a consultant, to name just a few of the gifts that God gave him. His rags to riches story began in the Baltimore projects of Cherry Hill. We have that in common. We were both born in Cherry Hill amidst poverty and racial segregation. Before overcoming obstacles to establish his 3 companies, Bith Group Technologies, Bith Energy, and through robertwallace.com, EntreTeach Learning Systems, LLC. He takes great pride in blending decades of research with practical real-world advice to educate inspiring entrepreneurs and executives worldwide. He has an arsenal of library of books, a very proven author, if I should characterize it that way, in terms of his subject matter, workshop and presentations that he uses to share innovative strategies for success with corporate and community leaders. He has a laundry list that we would spend the next hour of me going through the accolades and the awards and the accomplishments, his education, etc. But he serves on of the board of directors of the Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council, of which we are blessed. He's a member of the Greater Baltimore Committee, the Maryland Economic Development Commission, the Kennedy Krieger Institution. Among things, he serves as the chairman of Global Vessels International Humanitarian Organization, committed to eradicating poverty, human suffering throughout. He serves on the Board of Regents for the University of Maryland. But, please, I'm out of breath. Help me welcome Robert Wallace to Hot Chat Podcast. Hello, my brother.
Hello, Sharon. How are you?
Okay, we are so happy, always so happy that you are here to impart knowledge, because when you come with it. And so thank you for taking the time out with us today.
Good to see you, Sharon.
Yeah, I've known you now, I believe, over 25 years.
Longer than that. That's right.
And yeah, you know what, you're right. And so,
and I've known your brother even longer.
I know. And so when I look at you and the things that you've accomplished as an entrepreneur who happens to be minority,
amen,
as a successful businessman, a man of God, a family man, we're just privileged and proud to call you one of ours. Sound like I'm in church here, don't I? And we're glad
I'm one of yours. That's right.
That's right. But I know the story, but let's just briefly talk about your humble beginnings. I know that for folks who don't know about Cherry Hill, it was a community created in the 50s.
Yep.
And for affordable living. I guess they didn't call it that then. It was redlining, but it was affordable living.
That's right.
And actually was on the water. But the thing about it, it was away from the city of Baltimore.
That's right.
And so if you can move those Black people over there,
that's right,
in a certain social economic class, then that was what it was key to accomplish.
Yep.
But some great things and great folks have come out of Cherry Hill. But tell us a little bit about your beginning.
Well, yeah, Sharon. So thank you so much. And it's great to be here. Great to see you as always. Look marvelous. And I'm just so proud of what the organization is accomplishing and has accomplished. Mom and daddy, like your mom and daddy, were hardworking people. Mama was a janitor. Daddy was a laborer. 5 boys in Cherry Hill, hard knucklehead boys. Mom and daddy had to raise. And it was, we had ups and downs. It was tough. But I remind people 3 things that I bet your parents taught you. And I know your mom. And I'm pretty sure she taught you these things. I know my parents did. Maybe folks who are listening to this, parents taught them the same thing. 3 things, right? Number 1 is have faith in God, right? Faith in God. So if you would go into any African American living room back when I was coming up, you coming up, you had 3 pictures. Mm-hmm. You had a picture of Jesus Christ, you had a picture of John Kennedy, and you had a picture of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? Mm-hmm. Every African American living room had those 3 pictures. Because it was all about faith. It was all about believing in the future. Secondly, it was hard work. Your daddy was an entrepreneur. My daddy was a laborer. Those men and women, our parents, they worked hard. And they worked hard in the face of racism. So they taught us this work ethic, right? That you get up early and you work hard. And then thirdly was education. Those 3 things: faith in God, hard work, education. And what they convinced us of is if you do these 3 things, despite all the isms of this country, right? Racism, sexism, classism, colorism, all the isms, despite the isms, those 3 giants will overcome all the isms. And Sharon, that was the foundation for me and my brothers. And all my brothers are successful. Some of them are career military men. My brother Raymond, who you know with Northwestern with you, he's successful engineer by God's grace. So I really feel, Sharon, those are the foundational things that made a difference in our life.
And it's so interesting, and you're absolutely right in terms of foundational. And then I was thinking about the success right now of our upcoming first African American Black woman to be elected to the Supreme Court. And when she said she was one generation from segregation, because you think about our parents, you think about just how we grew up in segregation, right? And then not being able to, and then being able to given some abilities in our lifetime and our generation and what we provide for our children. What I know about you is you've also provided that foundation for your children as well.
Amen. As you know, I've been blessed. I married a wonderful woman.
We've been married up, Bob. You married up,
Sharon. We've been married 44 years.
Oh, wonderful.
5 kids, 10 grandkids. My wife is a genius. First of all, she's good looking and she's smart. So people always say, yeah, I know who the brains of the operation are about, but now I know who the good looks are as well. It's my wife, right? So I married up Sharon, but we were really intentional though about what we put into our kids. So we first put in what mom and daddy and great mom and great daddy put into us, right? Those three things: fear God, hard work, education. But then on top of that foundation, we put other criteria. We put criteria of learning technology, criteria about how to manage money, criteria about how to become an entrepreneur. Those are the other building blocks, Sharon, that we built on top of what mom and daddy taught us, and which is what should happen for each generation, right? You're going to put in more building blocks to help the family and the community to grow even stronger and better. And I think that was we were very intentional as parents about that, Sharon.
And I don't want to leave this topic without making a point here, because as you talk about generational wealth, we started, our parents, or, our neighborhoods, we were working class neighborhoods, et cetera.
Right. That's right.
Right. And I've come to learn later in life that your wife, Carolyn's father, and my father both had barbershops in the same general area.
That's right.
And we did not know that until recent years.
Right.
But and what you talked about, what were your thoughts around, for your 5 kids, your 4 boys and one daughter that you had, in the creation of generational wealth? What was kind of what you did in order to kind of make your children successful and the choices that they make? Can you talk a little bit about that, and then talk about your one son and his quest in terms of entrepreneurship?
Right. Actually, two sons. So I have 2 kids, Sharon, who I know have made millions of dollars. Now, whether they still have them today or not, I'm not sure, but they have made millions of dollars, right? So Sharon, it's a couple things. One is, I always share with emerging entrepreneurs, right? Create the future and then work backwards. Create the future and work backwards. So
talk a little bit about that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. So with the children, what we tried to do was what my parents did, was to say, you know what, our current environment is we're poor. We're in poverty, right? I mean, we had moments where we had no food. The electricity got turned off. We didn't have any heat sometimes in the winter. I mean, we were in a scarcity kind of situation. But despite that, mom and dad taught us how to overcome that and go ahead and build something that is that's better. So in that case, my future was getting out of poverty. So my dream was, okay, let me get out of poverty, right? So when I say create the future and work backwards, I'm talking about dreaming, Sharon. I'm about dreaming.
Okay.
See, we gotta, the way that we make progress, the way that we achieve great things, we gotta dream it first. It's gotta be a dream, man. And so with my kids, we took them on mission trips all over the world. We put them in front of kings and queens of countries. We showed them the highs and the lows of the global humanity, and we showed them we gave them a dream. And those kids took that dream. Now, so you create the future, which is the dream, then work backwards. When I say work backwards, that means now that you create a dream, you've got to build these pathways, right? Pathways that are believable, that the child can follow to achieve that dream.
So did you always talk? So at what age? This is so interesting to me. At what age did you start the conversation? Did you have them visualize it? Did you have them articulate it? I mean, how did you instill that in them?
Great question, Sharon. So when they're very young, the best you can do is to model the behavior, to model the way of thinking. So Carol and I would model it. We would live it. And the kids are like sponges, man. I'm telling you, kids are like sponges. You think they're not paying attention? You think they're not listening? Oh man, they are paying attention and they are listening, and they're like sponges. So
to
when
the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, that's true, sure. Amen. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So you model it when they're young. Now, when they're able to get to a point where they can understand, and in my view, it was 8 to 9 when they really could start to understand, and you could have a logical, rational discussion with them. Then you can put in the model to help them have some perspective, because they got to believe, Sharon, they got to believe that dream is achievable, right? That makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And so can you tell us a little bit about, I know you have several sons that they're all successful. All your children are successful, which is a real blessing. But I really like for you to share the one story about your son who ended up
in
selling his
California.
business. Yes.
Yes, Calvin was in the middle. So we had 4 boys and 1 girl. The girl was the baby, 4 older brothers. Can you imagine that being the girl in
And
that family?
she's awesome.
Yeah, she is. So, but the middle child. So Sharon, one thing we also try to do, Sharon, was to direct them into a career in engineering and technology. And we got, out of the 5, we got 3.5 of them that way. Taylor, my daughter,
3.5.
She's the half one, because she's a history major, Sharon, and a computer science minor, right? So I call her my half engineer child.
Okay.
But anyway, so get them into that, and so what we found and what we believed was that the wealth creation opportunities of the future would be based upon technology, and that the jobs of the future will be based upon the real high paying jobs in many cases will be based upon technology. So we were very intentional about getting our kids a foundation in engineering, right, and in science. And so what they were able to do was, with that foundation, my middle son, he went to Gilman High School in Baltimore, Georgia Tech for engineering, and he got his MBA from Stanford. So one day he gives me a call, Sharon. He says, Dad, and this is like 15 years ago almost. He said, Dad, I have an idea for a new business. I said, oh, really? What is it? He said, I want to do something in what's called mobile commerce. Mobile commerce. And what does that mean? It simply meant 15 years ago that our economy transactionally would start to become based around our smartphones. Not your laptop, not your big computer, but around smartphones. And he said, Dad, I got a great application for ordering food on my smartphone. Because at Georgia Tech, they were studying mobile commerce. He put 2 and 2 together. He said, okay, I see an application in food. I see an application in transportation. I see an application in real estate.
Wow.
So we had to decide, Sharon. So he came to me and Mom, said, Dad, Mom, this is my idea. I think it'll work. I think we're ahead of the curve. Can you loan me some money? See, and that's why, Sharon, wealth is important, Sharon, right?
Right.
Because
right.
if you have wealth, which simply means more money than you need to live off of, right? We had enough wealth by God's grace that we could write him a 6-figure check as his first investors, okay, to get this thing off the ground. Then what we also did, I used my connection relationships to help him, put him in front of people, because Sharon, you met him. He's a smart guy, good looking, intelligent. I mean, he got it all. Put him in front of the right people, he can sell. He can sell. So he was ahead of his curve, Sharon, but we had to decide of the 3 functions, the 3 applications: food, transportation, real estate, which one will we start first? Well, we decided to do food, right? Now, keep in mind, this is pre-Uber and this is pre-Airbnb.
Okay.
Right. So we saw this thing, or my son saw, I should say. My son saw this thing ahead of the curve, but because our resources were constrained, we had to pick one. We picked food, right? So we began developing this app along these lines. Make a long story short, Sharon, as you know, my son's company was purchased by a company called Grubhub, and was purchased before they went public. So my son got cash and stock in Grubhub pre-IPO stock. My son in his 20s became a multimillionaire. And I will also tell you, Sharon, that has been, so far at least, that has been the best investment that me and Mama have made. So, but here's the point, Sharon. We give them the foundation. These kids are brilliant. I mean, your kids too. These kids are brilliant. If you give them the foundation and you help them to create the future, and then give them a path on how to get to that future, man, they will blow your mind. And I am so proud of my kids. My other son, Bobby, as you know, Bobby's in energy. Bobby's down in British Virgin Islands now, building solar plants, power plants. So, I mean, these kids, if you give them the model and you give them the dream and you give them the safety net, Sharon. See, one thing that you and I and people on this call, on this talk, could probably give by God's grace, we can give our children safety nets. What that means is this: it means that it gives them the option. It gives them the option to take risk, right? To take some chances, and if it doesn't work out, they can always come back to live with mom and dad.
I happen to know that you have dared them not to do that.
That's true. That's true, Sharon. I mean, but they know in the back of their mind, though, Sharon, it's always an option.
Right.
They can come back home, and mom and daddy will brush them off and lift them up and help them get back in the race again. That's the blessing.
Yeah. And so that's beautiful stories. And I think you, as you raise your children and you raise your grandchildren, I think those are things to help instill in them in terms of helping them see that they can have a vision and they can fulfill the vision. Amen. And what you said was very important, helping them define then what the path is to get to that.
That's right. That's right, Sharon. And then Sharon is also like Sharon's also like the Sankofa bird, right? And in terms of what else do you teach them? You teach them to look to, as they're flying forward, to look backwards. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, as they're dreaming, Sharon, another source of energy and power for them is to tell them the stories about how your mom and daddy overcame. How your great mama and great granddaddy overcame. Tell them those stories, right? I tell them about my grandfather in World War II, came back to Virginia, man, and they were lynching black people. And I said, Granddaddy, how? I mean, they didn't allow black GIs to have to get on a GI Bill. They couldn't vote. They couldn't have land. I mean, it was crazy. I said, Granddaddy, how in the world did you and your peers, how did you survive this? I mean, this is crazy. He said, he would talk about how they would treat the German prisoners of war better than they would the black GIs in America. I said, Granddaddy, how'd you do that? He said, son, it's real simple. He said, despite those discrepancies, despite the hatred and terror that we had to deal with as black folks in the South, he said, but we knew that there was a binding agreement with an eternal power.
Amen.
And that was the source of their strength, Sharon. That was how they were able to overcome the hypocrisy of democracy. They were fighting for democracy in Europe and didn't have it back at home. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine loving a country that doesn't love you back and still be able to believe in the American dream? That's amazing to me. Those are the true patriots in America. Your grandfather and grandmother, my grandparents, who loved the country, that nation that didn't love them back. And that was the strength, Sharon. So I think that kind of those stories, Sharon, we need to tell the children so that they can learn from that and they can benefit from those stories.
And telling stories is what you do best. Let's talk about your role as an author and your focus, because when you were in graduate school, and you went to Tuck, correct?
Right. Yep.
You went to Penn undergrad, and then you went to Tuck, and to get your MBA.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And there, I think, is where you had this focus around, even back then, around minority businesses, and that is the stories that kind of then your when you look at the collection of your books, you've had I used to be able to keep up. What is it, about 9? It's about 9 of them now.
Well, I've written 8, but 6 have been published so far. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And when you look at that, I remember when I first met you was at a book signing for your first book.
That's
and that was
right.
at the Baltimore Marketing Association.
That's exactly right.
And so I know I have all your books. And so, and so talk about, because that wealth creation piece is what you've always focused on. Because I want you to talk about the books, and if you can share with us, because there's several pointers there in terms of minority business, the wealth creation piece, that what you just talked about, your great grandfather, your grandfather, that intersection of spirituality,
yes,
and economics, right?
Yeah. Right.
And then the different aspects of business, whether because I want to talk about acquisition and strategies and partnerships. But if you can just talk about the books, and let's talk about the tide of spirituality, and talk about other aspects of that. That'll be great.
Sure. Well, Sharon, just to backdrop. So when I was
Mm-hmm.
at the Amos Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth College, you got to remember the time frame in which I was there. I was there in the early 80s, like
Okay.
82 to 84. Now,
Mm-hmm.
go back if you will. I know you're too young to remember this era,
I
but go
sure am.
back to this time. Go back to this time. This was we were still programming at the time,
Yeah, that's right.
using Fortran and cards on mainframes, right?
How about coding pads? I
Coding,
remember
yep,
coding
that's
pads.
right. That's right, Sharon. I went to engineering school where our calculator was a compass kind of thing. I mean,
Yep.
this is before electronic computer. I mean, it was crazy, right? So I'm there at Tuck, the early 80s. What's happening in the economy? It is the evolution and the revolution of personal computers. IBM took the model and was beginning to market it on a mass scale. So here I was at Tuck, Sharon, and we only had 3 African Americans in our class, right? And I would often be in class. I'd be the only African American in the class. But what was happening? We were getting in these entrepreneurs who started Lotus and WordPerfect and all these new technology, personal computers and networking and all these things. And I noticed that none of them were women. None of them were people of color. I said, my goodness, what is going on here?
What's wrong with
Sharon, that was the seed for me. That was the seed. I said, this cannot stand. This cannot stand. That we've got to do something about this, such that when these people come here to talk about their success stories as entrepreneurs, that we're going to see more women and we're going to see more people of color. And that was the genesis of me doing the research, right, to look at this process. So I had the opportunity, Sharon, to do it even in a deeper way, because Tuck at the time, started the Minority Business Executive Training Program. And it's 1982, 83. Wow. It was the first program in the world that provided a mini MBA program for CEOs of minority businesses. I had the opportunity, Sharon, to be assigned the graduate assistant to focus on developing and building that program. So now, Sharon, I've got this reservoir of the brightest minds, CEOs and minority businesses around the country. And that
I never knew that about you. That's fantastic.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Sure did. And that was my first book, Sharon. It was called Black Wealth Through Black Entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And I made that connection through being at Tuck, right? I said, you know what? To get real wealth in America, because I would study these guys and I studied this process. And I said, you know what? You can get wealth other ways too, Sharon. But the American way, the way to accelerate that is through successful entrepreneurship. And that's why my first book was called Black Wealth Through Black Entrepreneurship. And you could put Latino wealth through Latino. You can put Native American wealth. You can put whatever you want to put in there. It's the same dynamic, the same process. And that was the basis, Sharon, of my work. And my first book came out in the 90s, as you know, and just went crazy after that, Sharon.
Talk about a couple more of your books, if you would not mind, so the audience will know. And I know they can go to robertwallace.com.
Yes, ma'am.
To get the list of all your books and access to them.
Absolutely, they can. Okay. They can. Yeah, robwallace.com. So Sharon, so you can imagine the first book came out and it was a smashing success. I mean, I hit the market. I mean, just at the right time. I mean, when there was this consciousness, awareness now of economic power, right? And I make the point in the book, I made it in many of my speeches. If you look at Dr. King's progression of civil rights, right? So in the beginning, it was about basic human rights. I mean, gee, give me the right to vote. I mean, give me
housing, jobs.
Yeah, Sharon. You know, job. Give me a safe place where won't be attacked by the police and the KKK. I mean, it was basic stuff, and I get it. That was necessary and critical. But you will notice the last 18 months of Dr. King's life, his short life, he pivoted. He said, you know what? It's one thing to have the right to vote and say that, I want economic power, but if there are no jobs, if there's no economy that
Right.
will embrace my people, I'm wasting my time. And he
Right.
pivoted, all right, to economic empowerment, poor people's issues,
Right.
right, the economy. And sure, I think that was what makes most of our leaders, like if you look at Marcus Garvey, you look at certainly Malcolm X, you
Mm-hmm.
look at, the leaders, they got it. They said, man, wait a minute. What we're missing here, we can't vote. Yeah, our lives are at risk from the terror we got to deal with. That's true. But if we can figure out this economy thing, this economic thing, boy, we can make progress. And I think, Sharon, that was the pivot. And that was one that I picked up on in graduate school. So you know what? We really need to pay attention to this and really accelerate this. And so Sharon, I began to write and study and research more in this area. So my books, if you follow the progression of my books, they all build upon the skills that I have observed are necessary to continue to be successful in an emerging economy, in an emerging world that's
Mm-hmm.
constantly changing. Right. So I started with Black wealth through Black, then I got into things like entrepreneurship, right? How do you take on the skills as an entrepreneur in a corporation or in a government environment?
Mm-hmm.
We know you're not the owner, but I quickly got into something about alliances and partnerships, because
Okay.
my research continued to show that, gee, if you can figure out how to collaborate with other businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, you can accelerate your opportunities. You can accelerate your growth. You can accelerate the potential. And so then I pivoted, Sharon, as you know, and did research on how to build alliances and strategic partnerships, right? That's been my best book so far, because it's so central and it's so important to everybody who wants to be successful in life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very, very good point. There was a stigma, it seems like, attached to minority businesses around that.
Mhm.
And it was when you decided to focus on that, um, some people would say that um, minority businesses are culturally had a problem with trust,
Mhm.
and therefore weren't as successful as they could be in alliances and strategic partnerships. Others would say, well, because typically, and this was maybe a decade or so ago,
Right.
that minority business held things close to their chest because they didn't really want anybody to know
Sure.
their. So where did you? So I thought it was real great that you at that point in time stepped out and talked about it. I think it's happening much more successfully now. But
Mhm.
initially the conversation was, well, why culturally are we not seeking partnerships and leaving money on the table because we didn't want to share?
Well, Sharon, I think that any group of people who have been historically and institutionally and
Mm,
physically and emotionally traumatized, right? There are side effects of that. And I think that African Americans in this country, I don't think we as a nation ever came to grips with the trauma that our people have had to go through in America for 400
mm-hmm,
years. The trauma. And so I think, Sharon, part of the characteristics of that trauma tends to be lack of trust. That's why, as you may recall, in the book, and I talk about the 12 steps to build an alliance and partnerships. The
mm-hmm,
first step I put in that model was trust, building trust, because I
mm-hmm,
recognize that is an impediment to many of us who have been burned, who have been ridiculed, who have been left out. That we have to overcome that. So versus trying to avoid it, Sharon, I head straight on.
mm-hmm.
So I do think by showing examples, which I do in the book through case studies, showing examples of people who look just like you, or like, Joe or Mary, right? If
Mm-hmm.
I show examples of people who look like them and that they were able to do it, then I think that begins to break down, the biases about trying it. And I have found, Sharon, now that minority businesses, for the most part, are very and collaborating and finding alliances and partnerships. But back then when I wrote the book, of course, it was a different era.
What do you think happened? Just more, we've become more savvy. I mean, what do you think has happened? What has turned the tide, you think?
I believe, Sharon, a couple of things have happened. I think number one, I think we are more savvy. I think we're more educated. I think we're more intentional. I think we're more focused. I think we come to the market with better resources, better education, better financing, better possibilities, right? The other thing I think that happened, Sharon, is I think there's been an acceptance now in the broader society that women and minority businesses, they're getting it done. They can get it done. I mean, back when I started, it was like, okay, I'm not sure. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. Well, there have been enough cases now where people of color and women are kicking butt. They're kicking butt. And the big corporations are paying attention and society's paying attention. And they know, gee, these women, these folks, they know what they're doing. So I think those factors, Sharon, played a role in that change as well.
Let's look into the future a little bit, Bob. One of the things I was going to call you about and tell you about now and tell everybody else, we're about to launch what we're calling a MBE CEO Pandemic Recovery Academy.
I love it.
And it's an academy that we're doing in conjunction. And so you're in the Board of Regents, so you'll appreciate this. We're doing it in conjunction with the University of Maryland Global Campus. So at the end,
by the way, I am their regent. That it has,
and that's why it was placed upon my heart. I was going to call you and ask you, would you mind mentoring us through this process? I'm not making it up. True story. And so part of it was helping because I think you taught me this some time ago from an economic standpoint. When America catches a cold, we catch pneumonia. Amen. When America catches a pandemic, we die.
We die.
And so as a business, and so our goal here with this 6 is our first one, and we look to through our coronavirus response and relief grant to do more of these in the future. This is our first one. It's going to start in May, but the goal is to look at certain businesses and provide them with the opportunity to fortify themselves. To survive in a we're saying it's a post-pandemic in business climate, but the truth of the matter is I don't know when we're going to get to post-pandemic. Amen. But to look in the future, yes. What would you say would be the important aspects of looking at a business to make sure that you continue in the wealth creation about business for the future, given we're coming out of this pandemic platform?
I would say, Sharon, I would tie to one of my books that I've written that hasn't come out yet. It's called Pivot Point Intelligence, right?
I love that.
Being able, because Sharon, they teach in West Point and the military academies this theory. It says at the point of impact, your strategy will change. In other words,
wait a minute. At the point
of impact. Right. So what they teach these soldiers is you have a war strategy that you rationalize and build before you go to war. Okay. But when you go to war, understand this. Understand that at the point of impact, your plan is going to change. If you are not flexible enough, that at the point of impact, when you go into war, Sharon, and you are implementing your war strategy, at that point of impact, what it teaches them is it's going to change. Things are going to change. So you have to be able to pivot, right? And so what I tell people in this new environment, Sharon, is because the rate of change is accelerating. Look at the last 2 years, Sharon, how things have changed our whole world. Man, I mean, we in my company, we work almost all remotely now, all over the world. Right? I never would have thought, Sharon, 3 years ago that we'd be remote working, but we are. And guess what? It works. We love it. It works, right? So this pivoting, Sharon, this pivot point intelligence is very, very important because the world is going to this acceleration is going to keep accelerating. Like you said, Sharon, there's no post-pandemic. There's just a new world. It's a new world order. It's a new world order, right? And that world order will continue to evolve. Therefore, if I'm going as an entrepreneur, if I'm going to stay relevant, if I'm going to stay impactful, if I want to be able to be in a wealth creation posture, I better daggone sure be ready to pivot, right? And keep my eyes open, be watching and looking and paying attention. Too many people just looking, Sharon, at the economy. They look at events of the world, but they're not watching. They're not watching.
You said watch and don't look.
Yeah, I mean, they're looking, Sharon, but not watching, because watching is a full body experience.
Sure.
Watching is spiritual. Watching is, okay, what are the dominoes here? For example, Sharon, take the Russian invasion of Ukraine. What we've done is looked at what are the domino effects of this situation.
Mm-hmm.
What if we stumble into World War III? What if we stumble, God forbid, into a nuclear conflict? What if the supply chain that we rely upon, what if it dries up? How will that impact our business? See, all these things, Sharon, these are pivot point matters, right? So you're looking at an event and then looking at the domino effect, Sharon. What could the domino effect be? So pivot point intelligence teaches entrepreneurs to consider and evaluate the domino effect of world events, not just national events, Sharon, world events, because we're now connected globally, and it truly is a global economy. And you've seen that already with Ukraine-Russia conflict. And we haven't seen the end of this, Sharon. We haven't seen the end of this. So you got to be on your toes, folks. You got to be every day. I know for me, as you know, Sharon, 4:30 a.m. in the morning, I'm on my knees. Yeah. And I'm praying, Lord, give me wisdom so I know what to do, because this world's going crazy and I don't know what to do.
Well, first you think of him waking you up in the crazy world, but then you think,
that's right. That's true. That's true. Yes, you're right.
But you know what, Bob, I am, as my granddaughter used to say when she was a little girl, she's still a little girl, when she was younger, she would say, yeah, are you thinking what I'm thinking? So I had to say to our executive producer, Sonia Bigelow Smith, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Bob, when is that book coming out?
You sound like my wife, because she says, honey,
the time is now.
Time is now. That's so true, Sharon. That's so true. I'll get back to you on that one, Sharon.
But I think our students and the world would benefit. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you're right, I got chills thinking about that. Would benefit from that conversation. That's true, having it now. Right. So Bob, I'm gonna be dialing you up and be bothering you.
I know you will. I know you will.
I know. We got I got ideas. I'm inspired now, Bob. Oh my goodness. I love it. But who else could bring it like Bob Wallace? My goodness. And I'm so sorry we're kind of like running out of time, because I feel like it's the beginning. I should have started with this.
No worries.
In terms of the future. But as we look at the future, the global economy remains global, but it's different.
Yes, it is.
And you said the new world order.
Yes, ma'am.
And so, those things that help us build businesses, the foundation is still there. But we have to take those external things we always did into consideration and defining what that is. And probably, Bob, what we should do is what you have done for your children. What's the vision? What's the path to the vision? Amen. And is there a new vision based on the new circumstances? And how do we get there? How do we get there from
Good point, here? Madam President. Absolutely. I mentioned the New World Order. I mean, think about it, Sharon. So never before, at least in recent history, have we now gotten to a point where the dollar, the American currency, is getting some real competition from the Chinese currency. I mean, China is coming fast. What will that mean? What will that, if our currency is no longer the global currency that is the basis of the economy, what will that mean, Sharon? What are the dominoes that are going to come from that? See, those are the kinds of things, Sharon, that I think about all the time. I know you do too, but many more of us need to, Sharon, because it will impact our business. And when the impact comes, it'll be quick. There'll be very little room for error. Therefore, we got to be on our toes, right? On the balls of our feet, ready to move, paying attention, watching, not just looking, right? Because the impact will be significant.
Wow, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. Bob, we have to come back. I'm out of time, but you've got to come back
I'd love to, Sharon. Love to.
and to continue this conversation. It's just been so encouraging. It's so filling. It's been fulfilling. That's the way I can
Amen.
describe it. It has
Amen.
been fulfilling. But thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts.
My
And
pleasure.
I know that there are any other people interested in reaching out to you. Here we have the bithgroup.com information they can see about. And if I know that you're a speaker, whenever, I guess they can go to the robertwallace.com.
That's correct. If they can,
If
yes, ma'am.
they're, to get about your books, about your
Yeah.
speaking engagements, about all those things. We didn't even get into any other things about the external stuff that you're also into as well. My goodness, I'm out of time, which means I got to get back on your book, on your
Amen.
schedule. All right. And so appreciate you. We love you dearly. Thank you for
Love you back.
thank you for walking in your gifts and all that you bring to the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. You've met him here, Mr. Robert Wallace. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam President.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I'm inspired. I am fired up and ready to go. Just thought provoking, I should say, just thought provoking. But ladies and gentlemen, before we let you go, I just want to, if we can give me a moment to acknowledge some additional sponsors at this point in time. For those who are listening, I'm just going to read out loud quickly: AARP, Allianz Science and Technology, AT&T, BAE Systems, BWI, Thurgood Marshall International Airport, the City of Baltimore, the DC Department of Small and Local Business Development, Dominion Energy, the Ellison Group, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Financial Realty Services, the Hilton, Horseshoe Casino, Leidos, Lockheed Martin, M&T Bank, Maryland Governor's Office of Small, Minority, and Women Business Affairs, Mass Mutual, McCormick, Northrop Grumman, Parsons, Peapod, Prince George's County Office of Central Services, SAIC, Sodexo, Truist, United States Postal Service, University of Maryland College Park, University of Maryland Global Campus, Washington Gas, the Metro, Zillion, and Zones. As I shared with you, this is an exciting year as we celebrate our golden anniversary. To learn more about our programs, go to our website, www.crmsdc.org. And if you missed any, you thought today was hot and burning, look at our website to get much more information on other speakers as well. And that's our CRMSDCcares.com. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube at our at CRMSDC, and subscribe to our podcast. You can find us on Apple, Google, or Spotify. But before I close, there is a special place in my heart for the Coronavirus Response and Relief Center and our media production team, behind the scenes support. Thank you for making today happen. Thank you, Sonia, Nicole, Renee, and Graybo Solutions. I'll see you guys the next time.